Welcome to my review of Breitenfeld, Lion of the North debut. This is a game by Decision Games. It is a Ziploc bag game, doesn't come with a box, but that also makes it very easy to transport, which is one of the reasons why I brought it with me these days, or I should say these weeks. I'm traveling. Also, I'm very interested in the topic. This game belongs to a system which is called Pike and Shot, and this is the manual with the rules that apply to all games in the system. Not that I think there are many games in the system yet. Very simple, very basic system. 8 pages of rules. The last page is designer's notes. The rules are overall clear with some obscure points, parts of the rules where the phrasing was either ambiguous and parts that seem to contradict other sections of the rulebook, but nothing that really was major, I believe. I said I believe because I played the game solitaire. If I messed up, well, I don't really know if I did, but the way I played the game made sense, so I believe that if I misinterpreted something, it wasn't anything major. As for the specific rules for this game, it's just a single sheet of paper. That means 4 pages with a lot of setup instructions, really not many special rules, and player aid here in the back. I would say that the main special rule here is that Swedish brigades can combine their attack or their defense. You'll understand what that means later, but for now, just write that down, take a note. There are 3 types of units when it comes to ownership. These 3 units belong to one of the players, and they represent the coalition of Swedes and Saxons against the units controlled by the other player, and these are the units of the Catholic League. Tilly are among these guys here, ready to fight against Gustav Adolf II. Here we have the map. It seems to capture pretty well the terrain at Breitenfeld, which was a very clear terrain, which is great, with the exception of this hill here. You will not have to worry too much about terrain effects. The map has colored areas to represent the setup areas. The Saxons set up here. Here we have the Swedes, and here we have the Catholic League. Still, I found the setup to be a little bit of a chore, a little bit more than I expected it to be. Now let's have a look at the individual units that we have here. A very important type of unit is this one. This is an infantry unit. This is a Swedish brigade. Oh, the 3 values that you see there at the bottom are, from left to right, fire factor, melee factor, and movement factor. This type of unit with this symbol here is a brigade which takes orientation into account. The top of the counter has to face a corner of the hex in which it is, and you may have to spend movement points to turn the unit. You just have to take into account where the unit is facing. Also, the 2 corners, the 2 sides of the hex, that border the top of the unit, represent the front of the unit, and the other 4 hexes, the hexes on the 4 sides, represent the rear of the unit. When stuff happens in the rear of the unit, it is usually bad for the unit itself. For example, if you own the unit and you're trying to fire out of the rear, or if you get attacked from the rear, not good. This is one of the main infantry units. Then we have cavalry, different types of cavalry. We have artillery. Artillery doesn't move in this game. Artillery was pretty heavy and clunky in this time and period and in this battle, so movement factor is 0. Artillery sits there. It fires during the battle, but it doesn't move. Also, artillery counters are printed in 2 different colors on the 2 sides because the ownership of the artillery piece can change. For example, this one is orange on one side and light blue on the other one. Yes, you can take control of the infantry, of the artillery of the opponent. Now, the Catholics also have a different type of infantry unit, which is the tercio. These guys hit heavily. These are just the big bad guys in the battlefield. Very tight square formation, so they're pretty scary melee. On the other hand, the good news is that they are not very fast and they're not very maneuverable, and they cannot combine their attacks, but boy are they scary. Now you set up your units, and then what happens? Well, first you have each turn to determine the weather. There may be fog in the first couple of turns, which will limit certain actions of the players, such as charges, which are not allowed, or artillery fire, which is weakened. Later in the game, the weather will turn into clear, and then you do not have those negative effects. In the first couple of turns, you have to roll the die to determine whether or not fog is a factor. Then you determine which player is the first player, roll a die. Well, each player rolls a die, we roll dice. Then what do you have? Very straightforward turn sequence. You have the first player movement phase with possible reactions from the non-active player, then first player combat phase with possible reactions from the non-active player, and then the roles are reversed. The second player moves and attacks, and again the non-active player can react to that. Actually, reaction is something that I really enjoy because it keeps both sides of the fight involved. Movement. I forgot to talk about leaders. Leaders are pretty important pieces. They can stack with units, and they are crucial to movement. A unit can move up to its full movement allowance only if it is stacked with or adjacent to a leader. And you will never have enough leaders to move everybody effectively. You have to choose where you're going to concentrate your action and which part of the battlefield is important to you in any given moment of the battle. Also, the other factors or bonuses that the leader may add to the unit's melee or firepower. Also, the leader can improve the chances of a disordered unit to turn back and become ordered again. If a unit during the movement phase is not stacked with or adjacent to a leader, the unit can only move 1 hex if that unit is infantry, up to 3 hexes if it is cavalry. Pretty severe limitation there. As you move, well, there are no zones of control in this game, but if you move from 1 hex which is adjacent to an opponent to another hex that still is adjacent, if you are moving from what in other games is called a zone of control to what in other games is called a zone of control, then the opponent gets a chance to fire at you. Cavalry intercepts enemies up to 2 hexes away. And if you intercept an enemy, you do not fire with a cavalry unit, but you can move your cavalry and then you can execute melee against that unit or charge. That is, cavalry units can more easily react to the movement of enemy units. So as the opponent moves around, you will keep an eye on what happens, because you may have a chance of reacting and perform a fire or melee against that opponent. And when it comes to combat, again, the opponent, well, you can declare combat against enemy units. Usually, you can attack a single hex as many times as you want, but you cannot combine strength factors. So you cannot combine melee or fire. Your units attack individually, with the exception of Swedish brigades, which is a great advantage they have. And they really need to do that if they want to have a chance against the fearful, the super scary Spanish tercios. Combat, you declare your combat and then you perform it. How incredible is that? Now we'll look at the player rate and we see how that happens. Also, very important, after you declare your combat, the opponent can react, the non-active player can react. For example, the non-active player may get a fire against you, and when fire is resolved, you fire against the opponent fires against you. That is resolved simultaneously. a unit that attacks can also decide to perform melee. It is better if you combine attacks. For example, if first you fire against an enemy unit and you disorder it, and then you hit with a melee attack. It's pretty simple way of resolving combat. You look at the line that applies to the type of combat that you're performing. If you use artillery, then you just look at the number represented by the attack power of your artillery minus the distance to the target. This is how in this game range is taken care of. You have a strength of 8, you attack at a range of 5, then you use the 3 column. For fire, and there are situations in which you may use regular fire, other situations in which you're forced to use reduced fire. Fire against is simply based on the fire factor of the unit that is firing. Melee and charge are based on the strength of the attacker minus that of the defender. You find that, and then you find the column. Once you have your column, you roll a die, and here you have the result. A lot of the results will be disordered. The unit is disordered, you flip it to its disordered side, which is the one indicated by a white stripe on the counter, and some units are always disordered, they have a white stripe on both sides. Anyways, very common result is disordered. Units may be forced to retreat, and sometimes units have to rout. A unit that routs goes back 5 hexes and may hit other units as routing, and when that happens, those units are also disordered. What is interesting is that usually in many war games, when you retreat, you're sort of like immune. You retreat and that's it. Here, your retreat can trigger enemy reactions, so other enemies can still fire at you. Cavalry units can charge you as you retreat. It seems mean, but there really is an advantage in this game from combining different types of units in an attack that lasts in different phases. Fire attack, then you hit with melee, and then you charge the disordered retreating opponents. An interesting concept is that the results may grant the attacker an F, which is not a failure, it is a fortune of war. Other results will grant the defender a fortune of war. Fortune of war is an extra action which you can perform just for free, and it can be a reaction, it can be an attack. It's good to have them. As the defender, you have several opportunities. You may fire, you may participate in melee. Cavalry units may retreat from an attack that infantry is attempting against them. Pretty traditional fare. During the combat phase, a unit can also choose, instead of attacking, to try to become ordered again. Disordered units have a number there. You need to roll a die and to roll equal to or less than that number in order to be able to reorder the unit, that is to flip it back to its order side, which is higher values and simply is better equipped to stand enemy attacks. And during combat, also remember, if your leader has a bonus, the bonus is added to the factor that you're using. During the attempt to order a unit, you can add the melee factor of a leader that is stacked with the unit to the number that you need to match in order to reorder the unit. This is the general idea. You attack. At the end of the game, at the end of the last turn, victory is based on the number of enemy units that you have eliminated. Also a factor in victory is control of the enemy base, which is for the Catholic League this hex here, and it is for the Swedes that hex there. So if you control the enemy base, you also have an advantage. So what's my final assessment about this game? It's not bad. It's not a bad game. It is an introductory level game that does its job dutifully. It does what it is meant to do, which is to give you an introduction not just to wargaming, but I would say to the specific type of warfare of this period. An advantage here indeed is that the system, and this game in particular, could be used for didactic, pedagogical purposes, which may be one of the best things that you can do with this game. Meaning, you want to introduce a friend to wargaming, then you look for a game that is simple, doesn't have too many rules, and da-da-da-da. Very good, this game fits the bill. On the other hand, this game, initially, it kind of feels weird because the two armies push against each other and hit each other and push, and not much seems to happen. Not much seems to happen. The enemies just don't die. What's going on there? You have to figure out a certain way in which you can combine the strengths of your units to achieve your goals. I hinted at that earlier, but there are just ways that you have to figure out. Since I assume that many of you viewers are experienced or semi-experienced wargamers, I do not want to spoil the fun of figuring out the right way of using units. I don't want to spoil that for you. You'll figure it out, you'll have fun figuring it out. The point is that once you do figure it out, then things tend to fall into a pattern. You do have to make things work a little bit like in a clockwork a clockwork system. You have to follow that pattern. It becomes a little mechanical. Almost, I feel, as if the attempt to capture the feel made the system feel a little stiff. That's probably my impression. You only have one battle, so there is a limitation there, because the replay value is not immense. In one battle you can try to concentrate your action in one area of the line, and in the next battle in another area of the line, because you cannot activate the entire line at the same time, not effectively. And you have a little bit of replay value there, but it's not huge replay value. I played the game and things tended to fall more or less along historical lines, which was interesting. I saw the battle happen before me and I was part of it, as opposed to reading about it in a book. But the sheer joy of gaming did not achieve colossal heights of intensity. It was okay. So I would say this is not that bad of a game. As a wargame experience, as a wargame introductory game, the problem that you may have is this. Yes, you can teach the game easily, but you also have to teach how to play the game effectively. The inexperienced wargamer is likely to feel frustrated because he can't figure out how to combine the actions and strengths of the units. So either you also teach to the player how to play effectively, or the system is not going to work for an inexperienced wargamer. There are other games that work as introductory wargames because the rules are simple and the gameplay is intuitive. An inexperienced wargame can really have the joy of understanding what's going on. I feel that this game is not that intro level friendly from that point of view. Overall, if you're interested in the topic and you want a representation of the topic in wargame form, which is a representation that is easier from, for example, the system that you have in the Muskets and Pikes system by GMT, system that I love, well, this is one such game. Simpler, easier than that game, but also because of that, less deep. That is the trade-off. For the experienced wargamer, this is not a bad game, not a game that's particularly memorable either. It is an okay addition to the collection of a wargamer. It's okay. It's an okay game.